Hey guys, Mando's here for a quick word. And you're probably wondering, what's a quick word? Well, a quick word is going to be mini podcast episodes that I share each week. I'll share one a week, and they will be 20 minutes or less, usually on the shorter side, a quick word from me. Now, this is inspired by two different things. One, I got the name and the specific idea from one of my biggest role models, Rachel Hollis, who I've mentioned on many other podcast episodes, and three different of you listeners mentioned to me about how you want to hear more about my mindset, more about what I have to say, but you don't want to hear any less from the guest. So my way of increasing what you hear from me, but not decreasing what you hear from the guests, is incorporating what I'm going to call a quick word, AQW. Hey guys, Mando's here for this week's episode of A Quick Word. Now, this is not going to be your traditional, inspirational Mando's Mindset podcast. This week, I'm going to talk to you all about grief. Now, when we hear the word grief, I think most people think of death or someone's passing. And now I have come to start to see grief in many different forms. And I'm going to read y'all some definitions of grief on Merriam-Webster. The first definition is a deep and poignant distress caused by or as if by bereavement. That's 1A. 1B, a cause of such suffering. And you continue to scroll down, it says mishap, misadventure, an unfortunate outcome. To me, I do believe grief is associated with death, with end of life. But in my eyes, grief also comes from change, even if that is a change that you want to happen. I personally have been experiencing a lot of grief in my life more recently. A dear friend of mine, Lee Silverstein, passed away about a month ago. And I've been going through a lot of changes and a lot of endings. And even if it's an ending that you want to happen, there might be some grief with it. And that's not to say that the ending is not meant to occur. Because just because there's grief doesn't mean you are not meant to end and close that chapter of your life. It makes me personally think about how I felt leaving multiple different jobs that I left. I was upset. I was disappointed. I was in a melancholy state and thinking about certain coworkers I was going to miss, certain experiences at this specific organization that I was going to miss. But in the grand scheme of things, it was better for me in the long run. But I had grief in the moment. I had distress. I felt mishap. I felt a sense of melancholy. Another thing I want to mention with grief is you need to allow yourself to feel that. And now grief might come up in a lot of different ways for everybody. Maybe it makes you want to cry. Maybe it makes you want to scream, whatever it may be. But you need to allow yourself to feel that emotion, whatever the emotion is. You know, my mentor says this quote, you gotta feel it in order to heal it. And it's true. Breathwork is something that helps me feel it and heal it. Going to the gym, going on a walk, whatever your body is telling you, you just need to do. Maybe it's physical, maybe it's not physical, maybe it's just sitting on the couch with no distractions, the lights off. Maybe you're in complete silence. Hell, maybe you want to go back to what you enjoyed as a kid. Think about that. I think sometimes some of us don't realize that we are bottling down emotion and we're not actually allowing ourselves to fully feel what it is we're feeling. And a lot of times that happens because we're feeling shame. I've experienced that at plenty times in my life in terms of not allowing myself to feel the sadness because I pushed it down, or I coded it with toxic positivity. Then there's the question of what is toxic positivity? And everybody could define that differently. But to me, that's essentially the ability to only have positive emotions and not allow yourself to feel anything negative. At one point in my life, I went through a stage of that, and I worked through to the other side of that, realizing that there are difficulties in life. There is grief, there is sadness, things happen, but it's how you deal with them. And it's also acknowledging them and not just brushing it under the rug, not just always staying positive, because there's the ability to do that to a degree, and that's during certain times in your life. And it took me a while to come to this. I've talked a lot about how I used to be that really negative Nelly, but then I made that shift, and then I was this toxic positive person where even negative things would happen, and I would never allow myself to feel anything negative. And eventually it just built up to stuckness because I wasn't allowing myself to feel other emotion. It's not saying you need to feel the sadness and stay in the sadness, but it's okay. And it's honestly better to allow yourself to feel that, acknowledge that, and then let it go. But without feeling it and acknowledging it, you're not gonna be able to as easily fully let it go. I haven't been able to. And if I look up toxic positivity, the definition says, is the act of avoiding, suppressing, or rejecting negative emotions or experiences. And then it says this may take the form of denying your own emotions or someone else denying your emotions, insisting on positive thinking instead. And positive thinking is amazing. And don't get me wrong, y'all. This is coming from Mando's mindset herself. However, there's a difference between being a positive person and insisting on thinking positively 24/7. So, and back to the conversation of grief in terms of bereavement, in terms of death. You need to allow yourself to feel that however you want to feel that. And that might not be crying. That might not be what a lot of people consider your quote unquote typical way of grieving. There's been times after my Mimi passed when I just wanted to scream. I didn't want to cry. I just wanted to scream and yell, and I fucking did. And allowing yourself to do that and release that energy from being inside of you is something that I believe will change you. I really do. So as I was mentioning earlier, I also associate grief because grief mentions in its definition distress. And distress often comes, in my personal experience, from endings, whether it was an ending I chose and I wanted, or an ending that I was forced out of and thrown out the door of. At least some grief has come from all the endings I've experienced. I had grief leaving my home in Western Mass when I moved away for college. I had grief graduating college, even though there were times when I was in college when I didn't even know if I wanted to stay. Then I've talked about that toxic relationship that I was in, my first relationship in college, and I had grief at the end of that as well, even though that was something I knew needed to come to an end. I could go on with the endings that I've experienced, as I mentioned jobs earlier, but it's been replaced by something better in the grand scheme of things. And that's why I think grief falls into different types of life, different areas of life, different experiences, I guess is more of what I want to say. But the biggest lesson I hope you all take from this, if you've listened to me this far, is when grief, melancholic feelings come up, allow yourself to feel them in whatever way your body wants to feel them. And I want to add one last thing about grief. The biggest thing grief has taught me in my life is to embrace everyone and every moment you have, because you're not guaranteed to have another moment with that person, at that place, doing that thing, in that environment, whatever it may be, again. And that to me has helped me so much. So I hope you all keep that with you. Grief is also a reminder to me to embrace everything and everyone and really live presently, because nobody's guaranteed tomorrow. And that's also been something that's even helped me more connected and love on the people I love in my life more than I was before. Because as I always say, guys, I'm not guaranteed to open my eyes tomorrow, and neither are you. So, love who loves you and forget the rest. Well, if you listened this far, thanks for tuning in to A Quick Word with Meanders. Stay tuned for the next one, guys.